In this video, we're going to show you how you can easily add the daily open, high, low, close study to your chart properly, and how you can use that study to look at today's data, yesterday's data, 2 days before that, and so forth. It's a very flexible study. So right now we're looking at an E-mini S&P chart, 60 minutes. What I'm going to do is right-click and go to Chart Settings. The reason I'm going to Chart Settings rather than going to a place where you would add studies, like the Studies window, is because the first thing I want to do is make sure that my start and end times are accurate. Now, when you use Sierra by default, it has your start time listed as 0 and your end time listed as 23:59:59. In other words, 11:59 p.m. and 59 seconds. That's fine under normal circumstances. But if you want to have accurate open, high, low, close data, you really want to take a minute and make your start and end time the actual exchange start and end time. So thankfully, most products open at 5 p.m. Central and close at 4, so there's not too much to remember. This is pretty much true for the S&P, the NASDAQ, the Dow. It's true for the currencies. It's true for interest rates, the energies and metals. The exceptions to this are the Russell, which has different hours. The grains have different hours. Soft commodities have different hours. But the vast majority of what you're probably looking at opens at 5 Central and then closes at 4 the next day. So if you live in Central Time, you could use 1700 and 1600. If you live in Eastern Time, you could use 1800 and 1700. You could adjust 2 hours back from Central if you live in Pacific Time, which would be 15 and 14, or if you're in Mountain Time, 16 and 15. So again, start time 1700, 5 p.m. Central Time, end time is 1600 the next day. That's 4 p.m. the next day. All right, so just put those in place, push apply. If you didn't have that already in place, the chart's now going to reload. Now we're going to go to Studies, right-click Studies, and we're going to add the study here called Daily Open, High, Low, Close. I'm going to add it and push apply, and let's just see what it does at first. So the first thing you're going to see is you're going to see a series of lines for each day. All right, so by default, these lines represent daily open, high, low, close info for the prior day. Makes sense, right? So if you look at this line here, this red line, this line corresponds with the low of the prior day. This green line here, that's the high, that represents the high of the prior day. The orange line represents the open of the prior day, right here. And the purple line represents the close of the prior day, which is right here. So it all jives pretty well. So how do we clean this up a little bit, make it a little bit more useful, and expand upon the functionality of this study? Is you can right-click, just as expected, go to Studies, click on the study that you have here, Daily OHLC, click on Settings, and in Settings and Inputs, you're going to see a lot of options here. First thing I like to do, just to really clean things up, is I change the number of days to calculate to 1. All right, the reason I do that is because I don't want to see all the other lines. I'm going to move this out of the way. I just want to see data based on yesterday. So that really cleans up the chart a little bit because now we don't have a bunch of useless lines. Unless you want to have more than one day, you obviously can. It defaults to 50. So I change that to 1. And the other very relevant option here is reference days back is set to 1 by default. That means that this is looking at yesterday. It's going 1 day in history. If for some reason you wanted to see the daily open, high, low, close for 2 days ago, you could change that to 2, although most people wouldn't want to do that. The best use of this study, in my opinion, is to use it once for yesterday's data and then add it a second time for today's data. So as you may know, you can add more than one instance of any study to Sierra. You just make changes to distinguish one from the other. We're going to go through that example here. So I'm going to leave this to reference days back to 1. I haven't really had to change any of these other choices here to get what I need out of this study. There's a lot of documentation on Sierra's website about this study. It does have a lot of other inputs, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm not going to do too much more to the inputs. What you might want to do is go to subgraphs and start making changes or adding things to the way that these lines are labeled. So the first thing I'm going to do is check the value label for each one. Value label like this. What that's going to do when I push apply is we're going to see the values in the y-axis, like where we see the current price. All right. Now what I might do also, is label the line. So if you want to see a label on the line, a text label, you can do that by checking name label. And for open here, in the short name, I'm just going to put Y open. like this. And since I have name label checked also, when I push apply, I'm getting a label like that. So now I'll go here, I'll say yesterday's high. I'm going to do the same thing here, yesterday's low, and then yesterday's, oops, yesterday's close. And then I'll just check name label for each of these as well. All right, now I'm getting the behavior that I expect. Okay. Now from here, there's some other things you could do. If you don't need all this data, you could simply change the draw style to hidden from dash. All right, so if you don't want to see yesterday's open, for example, you could change the draw style of yesterday's open to hidden and apply it, and you see yesterday's open goes away. So in this example here, if I just want to see yesterday's close, yesterday's high, and yesterday's low, I've now achieved that. Okay, so that looks good. All right, you can see it here. Now, let's do another example of the same study on the same day, except we're going to reference 0 days back. And what I mean by that is we're going to reference today's info. So you can right-click, Studies. I'm just going to duplicate the existing study. So I just click on it, duplicate it, go to Settings, and for the settings and inputs, I'm going to reference days back 0, which means now we're looking at today instead. And I'm actually going to take the close off because the close on the current day is really just the last price. We're going to take that off. And then for the high, I'm going to change the color to, let's call it this blue color. For the low, I'm going to change it to this magenta color. And let's say, just again to simplify things in terms of leaving things uncluttered, I'm going to uncheck the name label because I'm going to assume that I've got the mental wherewithal to understand that if I see a blue line and a magenta line, that's today's high and low. So I push apply, push OK, and now you can see these lines are plotted automatically. Now I could add separate labels to these if I want to. Okay, we just went through that. Studies, we'll go to our second instance of the study here. And let's say for the name label, I want to put just high for today's high, and then low for today's low. Check the name label option. Now we see today's high and low here as well. So there's a lot of studies in Sierra that have a similar function where you're offered the ability to reference X periods back or X days back. In this case, I'm adding one instance of the study for yesterday, which is 1 day back. And then I'm adding a second instance of the study for today, 0 days back. So this is kind of neat because these lines can all be plotted automatically. There are 100 other studies that do things like TPO value area lines, volume profile, things that normally people they have to go in and plot daily manually on a daily basis. Sierra does a lot of the heavy lifting for you using these types of studies. So if there's an example of a study that you'd like to see something plot automatically that you're forced to do on a daily basis, which obviously creates work for you, creates exhaustion for you, creates the possibility for manual error for you, let us know and maybe we can help you, research it. But this is a really good example of just a really simple set of inputs that you can use to show today's info, yesterday's info, and you can go backward other days or weeks or months, and et cetera. It all depends on the time period you're looking at. Okay, hopefully this helps. Let us know if you need anything or have any questions. Thank